I just finished making a video about a sign up in New York City in Times Square that has to do with Christmas, and it's an atheist organization that put this sign up, and it says on it, you know, who needs Christ in Christmas? And they put at the bottom, nobody, and trying to make the case that we don't really need Christ at all. We can celebrate the season of Christmas, or we can enjoy the season of the year and not make any specifically religious references. We don't need that in order to have a meaningful season of the year. And so I ran a little search on atheist news with respect to Christmas. And I found an article that I found somewhat interesting about an effort by some atheist organizations to create their own holiday during the same season of the year that will be an alternative to Christmas. And this holiday that they've created is called Human Light. Human Light. And it's a holiday that is commemorating, it says, secularism. It's a holiday commemorating secularism. And and I take secularism here to mean the word has been used in various different senses, but it seems like the word is used nowadays to refer to a way of looking at the world that seeks to find meaning in it without any reference to God, and exclusively looks at human beings as the source of their own meaning and the source of their own happiness. Whereas, of course, in the case of Christianity, we find our meaning in a transcendent source, in the reality beyond ourselves that comes to us and brings meaning to our nature and to our world that would otherwise not have true objective meaning. In the Christian view of things, the supreme reality, the supreme God, who is intrinsically valuable, who is infinitely valuable, who is self-existent, eternal and uncaused, the source of the greatest value and the most eternal and abiding value, that God makes us, but makes us not to be independent. We are always dependent beings, and therefore we forever depend upon God, and therefore to find our true objective source of meaning, we have to look beyond ourselves. Whereas in the case of this particular atheist effort, there's an effort to celebrate or to commemorate an understanding of the human person that finds our value exclusively within ourselves and our own self-perfection, which I find especially interesting. In the particular article that I read, it listed several things that this holiday is about. For instance, it says that it commemorates the humanist's vision of a good future. So if I'm reading that right, it is a celebration or a commemoration or remembrance of the secularist vision of the world, that we can make ourselves better, that there is reason to hope for a better future because we believe in ourselves and not in God or in some type of religious faith. A second thing that is characteristic of this celebration or this commemoration is that all people can identify with each other. In other words, the celebration, this Human Light celebration, is hoping that all human beings can come to see with one another, one that they can identify with. Also that they will celebrate and behave, or at least point toward a day when human beings can behave, according to the article, with the highest moral standards. And then finally it says to work together toward a happy and just and peaceful world. So this atheist effort, or this commemoration holiday that they've envisioned, Human Light, tries to imagine a world of peace and joy and happiness and highest levels of moral integrity, but all of this without Christianity. It's almost as if the story of Christmas has been read, and all of its specifically religious sources and meaning has been sort of sucked out of it, and what's left is a vision of the world very much inspired by Christian ideals, that there is hope, that we can rejoice in a positive future, in a world of peace and justice and joy. We can have all of that, but we don't need the religious trappings of it. We can perfect ourselves. This, obviously, from a Christian standpoint, is a utopian vision of the world that is absolutely impossible. It's impossible because human beings, as I mentioned a few moments ago, are beings of dependence. We can't possibly ground our hope in a positive future, in a utopian world, within ourselves solely. Just imagine how groundless this is. Think of this. The atheist can't rule out that tomorrow an asteroid or an undetected comet or heavenly body of some sort is going to collide with planet Earth, and that it will totally extinguish intelligent life from this planet, or all life from this planet, forever. The atheist cannot possibly exclude that as a possibility, that tomorrow or tonight or in 5 minutes, all that is characteristic of human life and the human quest of hope and meaning, all of that in the next 5 minutes will be totally done away with completely. The atheist cannot rule out that possibility. As a Christian, of course, we ground our hope ultimately in a transcendent cause that can actually guarantee that hope. But the atheist holiday here, that is based on this sense of hope and value and meaning and justice and all of these what seem to be transcendent ideals, not just ones that, at least the way it's being spoken of, not just personal subjective feelings about things, but the atheist here is speaking in terms of transcendent values, of things that should be characteristic of all humanity, not just me, but all of us should live in a world that is dominated by justice and peace and goodness. The problem, it seems to me, is that all of these noble ideals and all of these exciting things that are very attractive to the atheist, it seems, based on this holiday that they want to create, at least some of them do, these atheists are longing for some kind of transcendence, some type of supreme and objective good, but they cannot possibly give a grounding for that. The world could end in 2 minutes, and the atheist hope is totally shattered and dashed. Whereas, of course, for the Christian, we believe that there is this supreme God who is governing the world, who is directing it to a good end. The atheist rejects that God, rejects all gods, and therefore all they are left with is their own humanity. Think of how frail and fragile we are. Imagine those cases in our lives where, every day there are so many people whose lives end for various reasons, some of which they know about and others that they have no idea what happened to them, and their lives come to an end. The hope that we have as human beings, if we ground it in ourselves, it is a very fragile and shallow basis for our hope as a human being. And so, to sort of bring this to a conclusion, or these few reflections to a conclusion, I thought of two other things that I wanted to mention. One is another attempt at a utopian vision of the world through atheist principles, and that's Karl Marx. Karl Marx envisioned a world based purely upon materialist and economic principles, in which the world would move toward a classless society in which people lived lives of fulfillment and deep integration within themselves. And there would be no religion, because for Marx, religion is a big part of the problem. And so he envisioned this movement of history that actually inspired hundreds of millions of people, or at least many millions of people in the 20th century, like Soviet Russia and communist North Korea and Vietnam and China and so on, and various South American thinkers. It inspired many people to try to create a society that would move toward this ideal, perfect world in which people no longer need God, and they can perfect themselves in this through an understanding of economic principles and causes and eradication of class societies and so on. And so this vision, this atheist vision of the world, obviously in practice in the 20th century, was an absolute failure. They tried to eliminate the need for religion and substitute for it this vision of hope. But the reality is, the question that I have to ask is, where did Marx get his optimism and his hope? The atheist principles can't possibly ground them. How could he be so sure that history would move toward this classless society? Because there are so many material principles that work against the movement of history toward this ideal utopianism. Perhaps there'll be a virus tomorrow that will wipe us all out. Perhaps there'll be some unexpected stage of evolution that will lead us to lose our rationality, perhaps in favor of some instinctual impulse that will perhaps do away with our intelligence or whatever. You can't possibly rule out these things from an atheist perspective. So where do they get their hope? And where do they get their optimism? I suggest to you they're getting their optimism from the culture in which Christian ideals and principles and principles of hope have been so immersed into our culture for centuries and for millennia, and they're simply part of the world in which we live. Atheism can't support those things. They can only use them. Once atheism becomes dominant, I would suggest to you that people will recognize, if atheism does in fact become dominant, people will recognize its inability to ground those deep desires that we have. And I'm afraid it will lead to an age of deeper and deeper pessimism and doubt and lacking of hope. Then finally, I would say, recently I was in a bookstore and I picked up a book by a French philosopher, and I don't remember his name, and I do want to go back and find it and obtain the book, because I found it very interesting. It was a book on morality, a fairly new book, I think, a book on morality, and the author of the book is an atheist. But in the course of the book, he continually confronts the question of God. It's a book, by the way, that focuses on love. In fact, I think the title of the book is Love. And in it, he's trying to figure out, how do we, as an atheist, how do we cope with the fact that we lose people that we love very dearly? And he talks about the Christian proposal, that death is not the end of the story of the relationships that we have, and therefore the longings that we have for love and for friendship are longings that we actually can have those satisfied through unending relationships of love, first of all with God and then with others. And he makes the statement in the book that the story, the Christian story that he says he studied a great deal, does sound very powerful, and it's extremely attractive, and it's extremely beautiful. But he says we need to have an alternative for those who can't bring themselves to believe. And he says, I am one of those. He can't bring himself to believe. And so he says, what do we have as an alternative? And he admits that the alternative is you cannot possibly have an objective good. You can't possibly say that human life has value on some cosmic level or some objective level. The only good that we can find is some type of interior meaning or hope that we can give to ourselves, grounded only in ourselves, but it can't be integrated with the larger reality around us. It's purely a subjective sort of thing that we generate within ourselves. And that's all the atheist can have. And so I appreciate, and I think perhaps we can admire the atheist at least wanting to have and expressing the fact that they want to have a holiday to celebrate these deep longings that we have as human beings. But the tragedy in my mind is that the atheist lacks the framework and the understanding of the world that can truly ground and enrich and supply the needed sort of grounding for those ideals and hopes.